As our nation's horse population reaches staggering numbers, the question remains what can be done to decrease demand for horses in order to stabilize the equine population in the United States. This issue is framed as a matter of effectiveness. Policymakers need to find the most effective way to combat equine overpopulation, given that alternatives that do not address the root causes of overpopulation would only be putting a band-aid on a problem that will continue to perpetuate itself. This has been empirically proven by previous legislative efforts, and policymakers must be certain not to repeat past mistakes. Left unchecked, equine overpopulation will continue to drain nonprofit capital, both in terms of monetary capital and human capital, as rescue facilities become overburdened and lack funding. Furthermore, without policy intervention, the growing horse population will either need more land and natural resources to sustain itself, something that is not a possibility as our nation continues to urbanize, or horse owners will be forced to find a way to handle unwanted equines through slaughter, rescue, or euthanasia. Regardless, left unchecked, taxpayers will be forced to foot the bill as the Department of Agriculture, Humane Societies, and the Bureau of Land Management are forced to control the problem. For the purpose of this analysis, studies were used containing information about the number of horses going to slaughter each year and how that number would continue to grow if policy intervention does not occur. Furthermore, the effects of past legislation were taken into account, particularly how that legislation has affected equine population either positively or negatively, and whether the overall welfare of horses has increased. In determining welfare, the number of equine rescue facilities post-legislation were taken into account. A major component of the analysis is whether or not the monetary incentive provided by for-profit slaughterhouses plays a role in the overbreeding of equines. Research has been conducted to determine whether a correlation exists among breeders who take unsold horses to slaughterhouses that pay for horses and the amount of breeding that exists. The analysis distinguishes the money provided by the slaughterhouses as an incentive from the money that would have been lost had the breeder been forced to keep any unsold horses. As long as breeders can receive some return on their investment, with the best stock being sold for over market value and the unwanted horses being sold to slaughterhouses, overbreeding will continue to be the best option for them. It is this mentality that must be addressed by policymakers. Studies were also used that outline the factors or causes of abandonment, such as financial reasons, health, and the temperament of the horse. Opponents of alternative options such as slaughter believe that addressing these causes will actually cut down on the number of horses being abandoned and going to slaughter each year. The analysis provides some discussion of these factors, but directs the focus to the root causes of overpopulation, rather than solely analyzing what should be done once the horses have already been bred into existence. There is a historical precedent for legislating equine population control, including legislation for America's wild horses. In 2006, Congress voted to ban United States slaughterhouses, effectively shutting down all horse slaughter in the nation. Congress believed that in doing so, more equine rescue facilities would step up to meet demand. However, studies have found that this was actually not the case. In fact, U.S. horses were shipped to slaughterhouses outside the United States, depriving our nation of the benefits of that industry and actually spurring illicit activity. Likewise, studies indicate that the overall welfare of horses actually decreased with the slaughter ban, as there was more instances of abuse due to overburdened rescues. Today, horses continue to be overpopulated in the United States, and trends predict that this will not change without legislative intervention. Just this past year, Congress voted to overturn the ban on slaughter, allowing slaughter operations to reopen. According to data from 2008, of the 9.2 million horses in the United States, it is estimated that 90 to 100,000 horses are sent to slaughter annually. This means that if slaughter rates stay at the 2008 level, by the end of the year 2012, roughly 500,000 horses will have been sent to slaughter. Likewise, just as was seen during the slaughter ban, today the number of unwanted horses, as well as those neglected and abused, is still increasing. This begs the question, has the slaughter ban actually impacted the equine population and welfare at all? The answer is that it has not. This proves that the question is not about whether slaughter should exist, but rather how can changing the rules about slaughter and breeding decrease the demand for new horses. At the heart of this issue is a lack of consequences for overbreeding, coupled with a small return on investment for taking a horse to slaughter. The racing industry provides a good example of the lack of consequences for breeders, given that thousands of thoroughbreds are bred each year, while few are selected to actually race, leaving the rest to be sold off or taken to slaughter. Furthermore, of those thoroughbreds that do not win races, many are retired and bred themselves to repeat the cycle. The only solution is to come up with an alternative that legally limits the number of horses that can be bred each year. By mandating that breeders follow these rules, overbreeding can be stopped. However, because enforcement of such a policy would be difficult, policymakers must also get rid of the lack of consequences that allow breeders to breed multiple horses, pick the best ones for sale, and then throw the rest to slaughter. In order to do this, Congress must make the monetary incentive provided by slaughter illegal, by either banning it outright or by creating government-run, not-for-profit slaughterhouses. Given that government takeover of America's slaughterhouses would ensure that the way slaughter is funded is changed, such a policy would be able to effectively combat one of the leading causes of overbreeding by reducing the lack of consequences breeders have for doing so. In allowing the slaughterhouses to continue to exist, but to operate without providing breeders money in exchange for horses, equine nonprofits and rescue facilities would be able to exist without being overburdened by too many horses. This means that government grants to these organizations would be spent efficiently, allowing the spillover of truly damaged horses who are unable to be rehabilitated to go to slaughter. Furthermore, a policy of legally restricting breeding practices would ensure that the United States equine population stays at a sustainable level. These two policy options would allow the government to not be overburdened with the need to control the equine population, and in doing so, would ensure that the U.S. land and natural resources do not get overused and that taxpayers do not have to foot the bill for costly roundups and rehabilitation efforts. In other words, this policy intervention in the short term will have greater positive effect in the long term, and without it, more money and resources would be exhausted.